In this video, I want to show you how to add an Android view to a Compose UI structure. So let's get started by opening Android Studio and creating a new application in Android Studio. I create a new project. It should be a Compose project, empty Compose activity. I select and then next. Because I'm going to integrate an OSM map view to my Compose application, I'm gonna name this OSM map. And the package name is fine. Save location, I'm gonna change it to Compose course, where I store the source code for this project, for this course. And then I press finish and wait for the project to be created. Okay, my project is ready. As the first step, go to Build Scripts. I open the app modules build script, and I add the dependency for OpenStreetMaps or OSM. And the library that I'm gonna use to add that functionality is called OSMDroid. Implementation org.osmdroid. The artifact name is called OSMDroid, and the version is 6.1.1. The latest version is this. And I press sync now and wait for the project to be synced. Let's see if the project was actually successful. To find the artifact, so tool windows and build. Yes. No, actually it failed to find it. To make sure what the latest version is, I open my browser and search for GitHub OSMDroid. I open the project's page on GitHub, and as you can see, the latest version is 6.1.11. Let's go to the releases section. Yes, it's 6.1.11. So we correct this version, and the artifact name, let's make sure we are using the correct one. Org OSMDroid, OSMDroid Android. Also make sure that you have Maven Central added to your main build.gradle file. This new version of Android Studio is using another mechanism. It's not adding the list of repositories to the build.gradle file. So hopefully it has Maven Central already configured. So let's press sync now and wait for the project to be synced. Alright, yes, it was successful. So once the library has been added, the native library has been added to our project, I go to my main activity, and here I'm going to add my map UI. So I create a new composable for that, and I'm gonna name it map UI. And here is where I'm going to add my map. And this map is not using Compose, it's using Android views. So we need a mechanism to integrate this view-based UI to our Compose UI. So what I do is using this composable, Android view. And this enables us to perform interoperability between Android views and Compose. And first of all, it requires a factory Factory is where you create your Android view, and it receives a context inside this lambda as parameter, so we are free to use that context to construct our view. So because map views are created using a context and I have access to context, I can create it here. Map view, and I pass it the context and it's created. Next part is the update parameter. The update parameter is called when something changes that requires recomposition, and we can set the required changes, we can apply required changes to our view object. So here it is a lambda we have, it's a map view that we have constructed it in the factory section, and here we can apply the changes that we might want to apply to it. For example, inside this block, I'm going to set its tile source where it can fetch its data and its tiles for the map. So set tile source, and the tile source that I'm gonna use is tile source factory.mapnik, one of the famous sources for tile source that I can provide to my map view. So now that I have applied it, I know that it will load the tiles from this source and it will display it for me. I might need to make some other changes to my map view, so instead of directly calling set tile source, I'm gonna say it or map view. Instead of this, I'm gonna use map view and then say apply, and make these changes inside the apply block. So this is for our map view for now. Let's go to the rest of our UI that we want to create. What I'm planning to do is to create a UI structure, a compose UI structure, where I will integrate my map UI. So I'm gonna name it fun screen or fun UI, and inside it I'm gonna have a column like this. Let's actually give it maximum size, fill max size, and then I'm gonna include my map view as well as some other changes. For example, I'm gonna create a selection row where the user can select which city they want to go and they want to navigate to on the map. So first of all, I'm gonna place a selection row here, selection UI, and this selection UI is a composable I'm gonna create next. And following selection UI, I'm gonna include map UI, because map UI will be displayed after selection UI. Let's create selection UI now. Selection UI. So what does selection UI do? It requires a label inside a row, of course, modifier, fill max width, of course, and inside this row I'm gonna use a label, text, string resource, r.string dot select region from drop down. I create a corresponding resource, string resource here, select a region to from the drop down, and following my text I'm gonna create a drop down. I'm gonna create a drop down menu. It's a UI from the material design library in Jetpack Compose. So it requires a expanded variable and some values for undismissed request and also its content. So first let's create a state for its expanded parameter. Var expanded equals or by, remember, mutable state of false. First it is false. This is a delegate, so let's import get value and set value as well by pressing Alt and Enter, and then let's put our drop down menu inside a box so that the user can press the box in order to open the drop down menu. Box like this, import box, modifier, some modifier that I might want to use later, and let's actually use it now. For the box I'm gonna set a half weight, and I'm gonna give the label also a half weight, modifier dot weight 1f. I'm going both of them equal weights so that they occupy half of the available width inside the row. So I'm gonna pass this expanded variable, the state that I created, to expanded, and then I'm going to make some changes and add some variables and add some content inside the body of my drop down menu. I'm gonna add 3 states or 3 municipalities inside the drop down to enable user to select them and go to those cities on the map. So I'm gonna create a variable outside the composable, something like a global variable, and I'm gonna name it val cities or municipalities. Map of, I select the third form so that I can create an arbitrary number of municipalities, and this is going to be a pair, a Kotlin pair. So first of all, let's consider some municipalities from the California state. I'm gonna start with Los Angeles. Actually, let's start with San Diego. San Diego. And for the second part of the pair, for the second parameter, I'm gonna pass its geopoint, the geographical point that determines its coordinates on the map. So I import geopoint, and I have already prepared these values. It's 32.716144, the double values, and the second coordinate is minus 11716 2942, and the next one is, let's use San Francisco, and its geopoints are 37779379, and the next coordinate is minus 122 418433. The next pair is for San Jose, and it is 9.9445591, and the next coordinate minus 841152506. Now we have 3 municipalities. This is supposed to be a pair, a geopoint, sorry, and now it's fixed. Now I can use my municipalities here. I can say for item in municipalities, let's create one item each. So I can use a box here, or I can simply use a text box. But the important thing is that you should use drop down menu item composable. It has already some capabilities that makes it easier to communicate with your drop down menu API. So drop down menu item, it has, for example, the onClick parameter that allows you to invoke an event. So before completing that, let's first add the items. I'm gonna use a text box for the item, a text, and I'm gonna use the item's value, sorry, the item's key, because the item's key is the municipality's name. So that's what I'm interested in seeing inside the drop down menu. And when the onClick is invoked, I'm gonna say I want this navigation to be performed. And instead of doing the navigation here myself, note that we don't have access to the map view ourselves here. So we have to hoist this. We have to fire this event up and ask our parent to do that. So in order to be able to do this successfully, I'm gonna add a parameter as an input parameter to selection UI, and I'm gonna name it on navigate or on show on map, something like this, and it's gonna be lambda, and it's going to receive a geopoint, and therefore once I have this signature, I am allowed to call on show map aligned with the on show on map, of course, passing along my selected coordinates. My selected coordinates is item dot value, because it determines and shows the coordinates of the selected municipality. So let's complete our drop down menu. First of all, the drop down menu should be closed. How do we specify that? it is first closed, but when the box is clicked, it should open up. So I add a clickable to the box, a clickable modifier, I import it, and then I say, sorry, inside the box I have another better way to do this. I add an icon button, and inside the icon button I add an icon with the icon of menu, icons default dot menu, with a null description, and when this icon button is clicked, I'm gonna open the drop down. I do that by setting expanded to true, and when the onDismiss request is called, which means when I click with my mouse or I press outside the area of the drop down should be collapsed. So the value for expanded should be changed to false again, like this. So I have my row. Inside the row I have my label, and then let's also not forget to add some padding to our label, 8 dp for example. And then we have a box. Inside the box we have an icon button and our drop down menu. These two combinations, this combination allows us to open and manage the opening and selection of drop down menu items, and then we tell our parent, our caller, which geopoint has been selected to be displayed on the map. Next, I will show you how to use the value passed to our parent. So selection UI is called. We have to pass in the event that is supposed to be fired here. So on selection, on show, on map, we receive the point here, the geopoint. We have to do something with it. So first of all, we can pass to our map view some arbitrary geopoint. For example, I can define a new signature for map view. I can change its signature to accept some parameter, show, or instead of passing lambda, I'm gonna pass some points to show. So coordinates, it's gonna be a geopoint. So we will pass a geopoint here, but let's go add these definitions, this new signature, to map view itself. So coordinates, this coordinates type should be geopoint, and once we receive it, we know what to do with it. For example, I get a controller here, a map view controller like this, val controller, and I receive it from this dot controller, or simply controller. And controller allows me to navigate to an arbitrary point on the map view. So I say controller set center, or animate to. This is more beautiful. this goes to the selected geopoint with an animation, with a smooth animation. So I pass in coordinates to it and it performs the navigation to that point. Also, let's add a reasonable amount of zoom. So set zoom, 11 should be fine. Zoom level is double, so 11.0, and that's it for our map view. And let's now complete our fun UI. Inside the fun UI, we need to pass in the selected coordinates to map UI. So I'm gonna define a state for coordinates. I'm gonna say it is var selected coordinates by, remember, mutable state of. You see that I'm using states to achieve this, and it's a geopoint with an initial value of the coordinates for Los Angeles. So 34, 05, 33, 45, these are the geopoints for Los Angeles, and minus 118, 24, 23, 49. So I ask the map UI to initially display selected coordinates, and once the selection UI that includes my native Android UI selects another value, another coordinates, I can update my selected coordinates to that selected to that coordinate that is passed to us from selection UI. So I know that selection UI sends me a requested point, and I can use that requested point to update my selected coordinates. So selected coordinates is a geopoint, so I simply assign requested point to my selected coordinates. It's very nice. To see if it is working, let's remove the greeting composable that is used inside my surface, and instead let's use fun UI inside set content. Let's run our application to see if it is working. So Control Shift A to trigger our action and run. Alright, our application is running, but something that I forget to add is adding the permissions for the map to work. So let's go to Android Manifest, and first of all add the permissions for internet. Android.permission.internet. And also let's add user permission for Android.permission.access network state. If you want to work with the location access, the user's location, you should also add the location permissions, for example, access find state, access find location, or access course location, or access background location, but in this application we will not need them. The other change that we need to make to our application in order for the map tiles to load is setting the cache settings for our map view. So I go to the definition of my map view in the main activity, and here in the factory settings where we usually set the one-time settings for our view to initialize it, I add an apply clause, and then here I call configuration, which is part of this library that we are using for the map, OS Android, and then get instance load. I pass it context, which is it, and then the second parameter is shared preferences. For that I use context again and then call get shared preferences. I use a string for the preferences of this application, for example OSM map, and then the access mode for it, I use mode private, which makes it private to this application. And also, because factory section is for doing the initial and one-time configuration for the view that is being created, I can move set tile source that we are already using it in the update section to the factory settings section. So I cut this line and I move it inside the apply section. Alright, let's run our application. Run. There we go, our application is running and the map tiles are being loaded. As you can see, this is the amount of zoom that we are using, 11, but we can change it for a bigger zoom, and the changes are instantaneous. You can see them on the map. You can also select other cities, other municipalities from the drop down menu to go to different areas like San Diego. San Francisco. And the last one, San Jose. You can also change the amount of zoom from the map itself using its built-in controls. To see more details on your map and load them. Alright, that's it for our Android view. You can see that whenever we have a view that has not yet been implemented in Android, like map view or add view or something like that, that doesn't have a corresponding counterpart in Android framework, we can use Android view to use Android's native views inside our compose code. And as you saw, it has a factory section where we set its initial and one-time settings and initializations. We perform its initialization, we construct it, and it also has an update section that can run several times in different compositions. When, for example, something changes, some variable changes, some state changes, it can recompose and it can apply the UI changes to that Android view that we are using in our Jetpack Compose application. And with that, we wrap up this lesson.